want to create art that lights people up from the inside and shows people the goodness of God, that God has not left them, that He is very much present with them in their story.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. My name is Nancy Moore, and I am the host of this weekly podcast that provides career and creative inspiration to help you build a passionate and purpose-filled life. You'll hear from guests that will help you tap into your creative potential, pursue a career with passion, and build on your biggest and best resource, yourself. I'm excited to have you join this conversation. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get started. Okay, you guys, I'm talking to Brit Albin today, and Brit recognized and embraced her God-given talent as an artist at a young age. But that didn't mean it was an easy path to pursue. In fact, it was quite the opposite. During this visit, you'll learn a little about her life and career journey, how she leaned into obedience and trusted her calling to pursue a career as an artist. You'll also learn why she enjoys painting, what she paints, and the meaning behind a few of her creations. And interestingly, there was a topic that came up where she shared there are a couple of items that she carries in her wallet. And I wanted to point that out so you could be listening for that and you can know what she carries in her wallet and why she has those that she keeps there. Brit's love of the Lord and what she's doing will give you encouragement on your own path to purpose. And so I can't wait for you to hear from Brit. Here we go. Before we start this episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank my sponsor, Dana Day. Dana has been in the building and remodeling business in Tulsa for over 20 years and been featured on HGTV. She understands how overwhelming building and remodeling a home can be. With Dana's design expertise, she assists with every decision from concept to creation, which contributes to staying on budget and on time. Dana's commitment to her clients includes quality craftsmanship and unique designs. You can find her online at danadesignandbuild.com. And now on to the episode. Well, today I have the pleasure of interviewing Brit Albin, and we met through Brittany McCoy, which is a huge blessing at one of Brittany's retreats, and just noticed what a talented artist that you are, and you are just absolutely incredible, but I'm thrilled to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here with you and just reconnect and talk about the goodness of God.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I actually was able to get some art from you at the retreat and have a beautiful cross, two beautiful crosses hanging in my office. And I mentioned to you, it is such a treat to be able to look at them every day and have that reminder of God's glory. And it just fills me with such joy to see the art. And so you're truly in your calling for sure.
Well, thank you. And it's always a blessing just to know that it's a blessing to others.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Yes. Well, I'd love to have people get to know you better and learn a little about you and how you started in your art. So if you want, we could start there.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a long journey to being a full-time artist. My passion is to really create art that tells a story for people. So I love to hear people's stories and then think about, how can this translate to canvas in a way that it brings them hope on a daily basis and also spurs them on to create a beautiful legacy of faith and family. And so that is my goal with my artwork. And then in addition to art, I also am a creative consultant. So I love to find out whatever the passion is that somebody has on the inside of them and pour fuel on top of it, and brainstorm with them, and whether it's branding or events or just to help someone kind of get through a blockage on their dream. I love to do that as well. So that's a little bit about me and what I love to do. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. So is that through your company as well? I didn't even realize about the creative consulting.
Yes. So Brit Albin Art and Consulting. And so how it started was I worked for a lady with, they had, I think, 7 nonprofits at one time. And so we used to brainstorm all the time on different events. And I found out that I really love to research for people. And I love just to let the imagination like roam free. And God gives me some really neat ideas that I have seen over time really impact people in a different way. So I feel like I'm a little bit of a fire starter, which is fun because I get to, bring a bunch of ideas to the table, and I see the excitement in their eyes and in something igniting in their hearts, and that brings me a lot of joy as well.
Okay, I love that. So you're also kind of a cheerleader for people.
I am. I love to encourage people. So whatever that looks like, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about being encouraged in your own art. So, a lot of times people talk about being, I don't want to be a starving artist. And you are making such a phenomenal career out of your passion. And so I'd love to hear a little from you about just, how that got started.
Yeah. So, my earliest memory with my love for art came around 7 years old. My parents, they got a divorce, and it was really hard for me as a kid to process what was going on, and neither one of my parents really told me, the whole story, and so I was trying to navigate, what life would look like in a new city. We lived in Dallas at the time, and I moved to Arkansas to be closer to my mom's family, so my world turned upside down. And I remember during the divorce going to, I think it was like 1, maybe 2 art therapy classes. And they were trying to get me to tell them what I was feeling. But what I realized when they asked me to draw what I was feeling, that felt easier than telling people what I was feeling. And so that was when I first fell in love with art. I realized that I could tell the story in a way that felt doable and that people would understand. And so being an only child to my mom, I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I used to draw all the time. And then that kind of developed, and I think I was around 10 years old when I brought a piece of artwork home to my mom, and she had been praying for me. She was battling, like, did I make a mistake moving us here? Is my daughter going to be okay with the divorce and everything? And I was going through a little bit of a, rebellion and whatnot. And so I came home with this painting, and the picture of it was this little orange fish swimming in this great big ocean. And there was a big ferocious shark that was chasing this fish with big, scary teeth. And the most notable thing about the painting, though, was that the fish had a smile on its face. And above the fish was an angel with a smile on her face, too. The look on my mom's face when I handed her this painting was just the peace of God came over her. And she said, I know you're going to be okay. This means so much to me that you drew this. And I just sat back thinking, art not only can tell a story, but it can give people hope. It can be an answer to somebody's prayer. And that always stuck with me. And I think I knew from that point, that's the kind of art I want to create, is something that lights people up from the inside and shows people the goodness of God, that God has not left them, that he is very much present with them in their story.
That's incredible at such a young age. So 7 to 10 years old, that you were so perceptive in that message, and then being able to, articulate that through your art, basically.
Yeah. And it carried me through. It's funny. I didn't know growing up after that, what the Lord was doing in my heart and what he was solidifying as far as, a career inside of me. And I tried a lot of different styles of art. And I remember not feeling fulfilled in any of these, popular ways to create. And I struggled with that. Fast forward, I went to college my freshman year at a large university, and I took their art classes and remember sitting in class and thinking, I don't resonate with any of this. We were having to do nude drawings to learn the figure. And I just remember feeling so sad for the person who was standing up there having us draw them. And I was like, Lord, this is not it. And long story short, I went to church one of the last Sundays before break. And I was just wrestling, like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. On one hand, it's the most fun I've ever had, with friends and all of the things. But on the other hand, it didn't feel right. And I wasn't sure what to do with that. And I went to a large church at the time, and a pastor, it's one of those large churches, you don't get to know the pastor very well. It was like that. And I hadn't been going that long. But he saw me sitting in the cafe, and he passed by, he stopped, and he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Excuse me, do you sing?" Well, he didn't know that all growing up in my youth group, we had a traveling youth choir. I loved to worship. I loved to sing. I was a worship leader too. And I, sheepishly said yes. Or a friend actually answered for me because I think I was just so stunned. And he said, "You need to pursue that." Well, that summer, a friend of mine told me she was going to a Bible college in South Dallas, Christ for the Nations Institute, and that I needed to pray about going with her because she was going to go do the music track. And I remember driving myself to my childhood church. It was probably around sunset, and just bawling because it felt like such a monumental decision to leave one college and to go to another. I had never been to this college before. It was unaccredited at the time, and so I knew there was debt that was going to be, accrued, and all of these different pressures. And a song came on by Hillsong, and it was, "All I need is you, God, is you. All I need is you." And it just broke me. I thought, you know what? If everything fails, at least I took a step towards Jesus. At least I chose him. And so I did. I signed up for this college, and I had no idea what I was stepping into. I remember driving up on campus thinking, what did I just do? It was so scary, just to be somewhere new. But my favorite story that I know that you're going to love comes next. And that is, I was basically laying my art career down, I thought, because there was no art classes at Christ for the Nations. So I was really trusting him with an unknown future. And they just happened to have one art class that they had just started on campus. And I went from a large university with an amazing art program to the basement of an unaccredited college and learned from a teacher who did not really speak English. So there were lots of communication barriers. But that is the class that taught me how to use roofing tar as a textural element in painting. And I fell in love with texture. And so I accredit that, that one class in the basement, in the unseen space, to what I do today, because I use some form of texture in everything that I create. And I'm so grateful that I took a chance on the Lord and continued to just position my feet towards him. It wasn't easy, and I had to learn a lot. But it's probably one of my most loved achievements.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So it's I'm going to take you back a little bit. So when you were unhappy in that art class, were you starting to pray and think, this isn't right, I need to make a change? How did that feel, that journey?
College is interesting, especially your first year, because there's so many thoughts and emotions and things going through your mind that, there was, I want to be accepted, those thoughts. There's the, well, I'm behind, and if this isn't it, then what do I do, type of thing. All the peer pressure, all the things. And I think I felt a little lost, but I didn't know what I know now, and that's to really spend time in the Lord's presence and work it out with Him and let Him guide you. I think I needed those people, those angels to come along to kind of say, hey, Brit, why don't you consider this? And then that really opened up because the Lord would not let me leave that thought of Christ for the Nations. And I wrestled with it all summer. That's why 2 weeks before class started, I was signing up because it took me that long to wrestle with it before I made the decision to go. So.
Okay, I understand that. I'm going through something right now where this certain thing keeps popping in my head that I need to do it, and I just need to trust the Lord and do it.
It's hard. It's hard to do that, but it is always, He honors our steps towards Him. And it's scary when you don't know how to do something or you don't know what the solution is. And so I always tell people, especially like young artists who are afraid, right? Because they have, like what you said, the fear of the starving artist and all of these things that they've heard horror stories about. But if you're authentic in your pursuit of Jesus, then He will not fail you. So you trust Him with the process and you take steps towards it.
I love that. So if you'll share a little bit about your story behind feeling like you shouldn't pursue your art, because I think that will be very encouraging for some people to hear.
Yeah.
And how, overcoming that and stepping into what you are called to do.
Yeah. No, the Lord has so much patience with me because I feel like I've gone through waves where I doubt, and the Lord ever so lovingly reminds me that I'm where I need to be. But then also there's a fearlessness that has been developed in me over time that He has allowed me to grow in my confidence with my gifting and with my passion because I've seen what He's done with it over time. And so it's scary starting out, right? Because you don't have that to look back on, and you're just wondering like, oh my gosh, this feels so scary. And I don't know that this is the Lord. You start questioning yourself to death, But when I was in New Orleans. My husband and I lived in New Orleans for 10 years. So like when I first got there, I had like an asymmetrical haircut and dyed a portion of it blue. I was trying to be all artsy and cute, and it just did not feel like myself. And so I learned over time with my good friend Tracy, who had the nonprofits. She kept giving me opportunities to share my gift and be a blessing. And I'm so grateful for that because that helped me to kind of get to where I needed to be to trust the Lord a little bit more with it. And I didn't know anyone who was doing what I was doing. And that was the other scary thing. I had followed some successful artists online, but as far as relationally, having that person to speak into your life in the exact industry that you're wanting to pursue, it felt necessary, but it wasn't available, or I didn't know where to look. And I remember it was like one of those things where the Lord kept bringing it to my mind, start your art business, start your art business. And I was doing it on the side of my full-time job, but I knew He wanted me to push all in, and I just didn't. I was so hesitant with that. And so He gave me a dream that I'll never forget. I can still close my eyes today and see details of it. And that's only happened to me a handful of times so far. But the dream was, and it's going to sound silly because it is silly, but this is how the Lord in His creativity gets through sometimes. But there was this big body of water, and there was an island in the middle of the body of water. And around this island were all these different colored rotary phones. And in the dream, I was standing on a swimmer's block, like for a race. And there were other people that were standing on these blocks too. And everybody's goal was to swim out to this island and pick up a phone. So I jump in the water, I'm swimming, and I get to the island, and there's a yellow phone there. And I pick up the phone, and then I wake up. And I told my husband the dream. We're laughing. Who dreams about rotary phones, right? And rainbow rotary phones and all of this. Well, my boss at the time had just been studying about the 7 mountains of influence and how each mountain of influence is associated with a color. And so the 7 mountains of influence, they're all of the ways that you can impact culture today. So there's business, education, church, arts and entertainment, media, economy. So I started looking and I thought, oh, I wonder what the color yellow symbolizes in this. And it was arts and entertainment. And it was one of those aha moments. Like, you can't make up. I had no idea about the 7 mountains of influence. I had no idea about the color yellow symbolizing arts and entertainment in this example. And it was such a revelation for me that I knew what the Lord was asking. I knew that I knew what the Lord was asking. And so I did. I pushed all in. And, the first month was so scary because you're like, where's my income going to come from? What if they don't buy paintings? Like, what if? But I made just as much as I did with my full-time job after that. I think it was, if I remember correctly, like the first 6 months to a year, it was almost exactly what I had made. And the Lord just showed me, like, I've got you. Like, you do not have to worry about this. When I tell you to do something, all I'm asking is for your step of obedience. So I still have the checks in my wallet to this day, sitting right here next to me. The 2 checks from people that spent the most during that time and invested in me and my art business because they knew I was just starting out. And they were for larger amounts. But I keep them in my wallet because I want to be reminded every once in a while that God is faithful, and that also that there's a community of people that love me enough to invest in this God-given dream. And I still pray for them all the time, when I see those checks. So grateful for the journey.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I love that. I have tears in my eyes again. I just love that. Okay. So you talked about not having somebody to kind of look at as far as your art. So you didn't have a mentor at the time, or did you feel like you did?
Well, I always say when people ask me about mentors, I believe wholeheartedly in mentors. Mm-hmm. And, financially, we weren't in a place to where I could just hire a coach, or I felt like I couldn't, right? Because I was just starting out. But I will say that God definitely, looking back, put strategic people in my life at the right time. And I had to follow through with cultivating those relationships and asking questions, and also admitting when I needed help. And that felt scary too, but it was also such a joy. Later, years later, I invested in myself there's an artist by the name of Vanessa Horabuena, and she does a lot of live painting of Jesus and whatnot, and she's in Arizona. Incredible artist. She worships while she paints. She's just so authentic. And I was able to go sit under her for 2 months in her studio and warehouse, and she had about a 10,000 square foot facility that they were just, making prints and doing live worship paintings. And so I am a firm believer in investing in yourself. And if you don't know how to do something, ask for help and go seek out those people. And money will always be an excuse, to not pursue something. But if you are not able to invest in yourself in that way and understand or outsource what you need to, then I would say look around your community right now. Who has the knowledge and insight that you need? And then don't be afraid to ask for it. People ask me questions, like artists that are just starting out or thinking about doing something. They know that I'm available online, on Instagram, wherever they can find me. And I will help them as much as I can, because I want them to feel as though they have somebody in their corner, because there was a time where I didn't feel that for myself. But, a lot of that was the lie of the enemy. There were people in my corner all the time, giving me opportunities and spurring me on. But I think the enemy is so sly, and he uses isolation. And so what happens with creatives, I've talked a lot with my friend Juliet about this, but what happens with creatives is we spend so much time behind closed doors, focusing on our creativity and our craft, that we're by ourselves a lot. And so that can become, a place where the enemy can come in and whisper those lies. And so you have to be really intentional. And in my studio space, I have scriptures. I have, anything and everything, little notes from friends that I have on a mirror, just taped to it. But anything that can redirect my eyes towards Jesus and my steps towards Jesus, I'm going to put there, because it's too important for me to show up in an authentic and courageous way, if you will. It's my testimony. It's I don't have time for the enemy to whisper those things anymore. So now what do I need to do to create a space to where that's no longer my focus, that I don't give time to? So.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, I have so many questions, but I do want you to talk about your podcast, because I want people to know that they can hear more from you and just a little about that. So it's called the Yellow Soul Podcast with Juliet. You mentioned Juliet Duggar and yourself. And I would like for you to just kind of share a little bit about the premise of the podcast and what you all share.
Yeah. So I actually, I met my friend Juliet. She's in Austin area. But I met her randomly on a Facebook group we were only a part of like one day. And I think I shared a post of my story, and she saw it, and something in her just like, she had to message me and ask me about my story. And so we started talking on the phone, and she has been one of my greatest friendships and joys in the last couple of years. And she asked me to be a co-host for a segment of her podcast. So I do the ground table segment of the Yellow Soul podcast, and she's a soul care coach. She is the Lord has given her such wisdom. She has 4 beautiful kids that are grown, and they are living out the gospel and being encouraging. And she holds space for people to dream, to weep, to wrestle, to, whatever they need so well. And I've learned so much from her. So she really wanted a space to be able to bring people on and share their stories of hope, and also the ground level stories, like tell us the heart of the hard, and then how God has led you through such a challenging season, because it's all about giving people examples that they're not alone. God can bring them through whatever it may be. And so it's been such a rich space to have these conversations with people and interview guests that, everybody has an incredible story. And when you start hearing people's stories over and over, it really magnifies who God is in a way that is just incredible. So you can find that on it's Apple or Spotify, Yellow Soul Podcast. And then I think I have a couple of episodes in there where I'm sharing more in depth of my story. So you can go check that out if you want to hear more about my journey in art.
Okay, I'll check that out, and I know others I'm sure will as well. I want to take a short break to share my next live event. It's a live podcast event called Conversations with Passion and Purpose on Friday, May 9th from 11:30 to 1 in Tulsa. My special guest is going to be Muriel Juneberry Berrien. She is the creative mastermind behind Strawberry Shortcake and the Care Bears. She's best known for bringing her beloved characters to life, well, and for her fun kitchen dances on social media. Muriel will share the story of her artistic journey from the early beginnings to creating some of the most iconic characters in pop culture. So this conversation, you will hear how she stays inspired, her daily habits that set her up for success, and how her positive outlook has shaped her life and career. Whether you're an aspiring artist, a fan of her work, or simply looking for a dose of creativity and motivation, this is an event you won't want to miss. This is a room that you will want to be in. The women are incredible. The conversations and connections are amazing. And I would love to see you connect, learn, and grow through this conversation. So to purchase tickets, go to sharingpassionandpurpose.com, hit the event link, and you will be able to purchase tickets. And I would love to see you there. So you mentioned that you have art coming up for Easter, something that you're going to be working on. And so I'd like for you to kind of share a little bit about what that is and then the backstory, I guess.
Yeah. So every year since I started my creative business, the Lord has given me one or two series ideas per year to develop. And first it started out with the Mended series. That was like one of my first series, all about God's grace on top of our brokenness and how he transforms our stories and brings beauty to it. And then it was the Raising Arrow series, all about family legacy, based on Psalm 127. And, you know, it's evolved since then. And so I've been holding on to this one idea for a couple of years now called Mended at the Cross. And it's kind of similar to my Mended series paintings, which really kickstarted my career as an artist. People just loved that. It's based on the Japanese philosophy of kintsugi, the art of mending something broken with gold. They accentuate the brokenness, and they say that the brokenness holds the story, and the story is what makes it beautiful. And so I had a friend, and he reached out to me, and he was going through a terrible divorce. He had 4 kids. And we knew this couple well, and our hearts were just grieving during this time because it looked like there was no way to mend the relationship. And he reached out and he said, you know, Brit, I have this idea for a painting. Would you consider doing a painting around the Mended series, but make it a cross? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me think on that. And so I spent some time prayerfully considering it, and the Lord just showed me what it would look like. And it's this beautiful cross that's textured, and it has all this gold on it. And the background is very fluid, and it's got all this movement to it, kind of like the Holy Spirit, you know. And I thought, wow, what if I call it Mended at the Cross? And all this meaning started coming up for me. And so I painted it for him. And I said, Marcus, you know, what do you want this for? And he said, honestly, I'm going to give it to my soon-to-be ex-wife as like a parting gift, because I want her to know that even though this relationship may be on the brink and it looks that way, that she's not too broken, and that God can mend and restore anything that she's battling with. And I just was like overwhelmed by that. You know, it was a large painting. It was like a 35 by 60 painting. So to give somebody that gift, you know, he still very much wanted the marriage to work. They just had a lot of different things going on. And so anyway, I got a text about a month to 2 later, and it was a picture of the painting in their living room. And this was from his wife. And there was an initial on one side for her name, an initial on the other for his. And she sent me a picture, and she said, we're back together. This will always be a memorial of what God has done in our marriage. And I lost it. I mean, you talk about the redemption of the Lord. Like, I can't think of anything better than that story. And I mean, why I've held on to it for 2 years, I don't know. But a good friend of mine, she lovingly reminded me, she said, Brit, you're kind of doing a disservice to people by not sharing this story. And so I asked them for permission to share it. And they said, yes, absolutely. Like, share it. And so, yeah, I think Easter this year is going to be the time where I launch the series, launch the Prince, and I'm really excited about it because it holds not only meaning for me because it's how my business started with this Mended series, right, all those years ago, but that it's still creating such a beautiful impact on people's lives today in a whole new way. I just think it's going to be really special.
I do too. I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I do want to ask about making an investment in yourself and what that means to you, and then what you're doing to make that investment in yourself.
Such a good question. I think for a long time, I didn't really invest in myself. And it took me a while to understand that I needed certain daily rhythms that would bring joy into the day, because I can get distracted easily, and go on a bunch of different rabbit trails. And then at the end of the day, think, what did I accomplish? What did I just, So the daily rhythms have helped me so much. And I think first and foremost, what comes to mind when you talk about investing in yourself is, for me, it's centering myself in the Word of God. That is where I am the most fulfilled and happy and love to see like the narrative and who God is like throughout Scripture. But also it just sets my mind in such a positive direction for the day that has become like a daily rhythm that I'm non-negotiable about. Like that, it has to happen. And I think with that, for me too, there was a long season where I didn't seek out community, and I thought, I'll just spend time in the studio, painting with the Lord, and I don't really need to do anything with anybody else. Like, I don't need to, open up my home and let people come in and see the art mess and all of this stuff. And I created so many excuses during that time. But what I was missing out on was one of my biggest joys, and that's people, getting to know people, journeying with people, spurring each other on. I'm an encourager by nature. So to not have people around me, it was a very lonely place. And so, I view community as an investment in yourself. So leaning into the Lord and learning with Him, building community. And then, like I said earlier, what are the areas that you're struggling most with, and who in your circle knows of a resource or something that can help you so that you don't feel the weight of having to do it all on your own. Those would be probably the key things I would say.
Okay, I love that. And I'm all about community too.
Yeah.
So do you have your quiet time or your spiritual time in the morning? Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah.
Is it first thing when you wake up?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I always used to think that it had to be in the morning. It had to be like the first waking moments. And then, if you missed it and it was like noon, then you might as well just like forget it because you've missed the mark. I'm not sure why I believed that lie growing up. But it's different in different seasons. So my husband and I have traveled around for the past 4 years. We did something crazy, and we didn't have a home base, and we just traveled, and we were prayerful and asking the Lord where He wanted us to land. After being in New Orleans for 10 years, we knew that the time there had ended, but we didn't know where we were going next. And so it was a really interesting time. We stayed on a farm raising cattle. We stayed on a horse ranch. We stayed in Arizona. We didn't go anywhere out of the country, but still it was the daily rhythms were different every single place, which I think was fun for me as a creative because there was always something new to experience. But that said, now in this season that I'm in, I do read in the morning because there's very strategic things that I want to accomplish. And I view this art business as a co-creation with Christ. And so if I'm painting and I haven't spent time in the Word, then how is he going to speak to me so clearly? So I try to open up that channel before I get started. And that's just positioning your feet towards him the first part of the day. And some days, I love my paper Bible. There's always been something about a paper Bible. So I love that. But my husband loves the digital, app, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And so, yeah, if it's still dark in the room when I'm up and I can't read my paper Bible in there, then I'll have to get up, and it's just discipline to go in another room and, open the Word. But the Lord has given me such amazing ideas just by reading his Word, spending some time journaling, and then maybe sketching out something, just a thought, because he often brings it back at a later time and then lets me know, like, hey, now let's develop this. And so it's been cool to see that over time, just how he communicates differently with each one of us.
Yeah, there's so many questions that I have from what you just said. So I use a digital, my Bible app, but I feel like maybe I do need to get back to the paper version because all of my books are paper. I have to have the actual book. So it's funny that my Bible, that I'm doing the digital, the Bible app. But
I did the digital Bible too for 2 years. I didn't really pick up my paper Bible because it was all right there. But what I realized for me is I was missing the joy of marking in my Bible and creating notes. I have one of the journaling Bibles, and so there's places in the margins where you can go. And I'll never forget, my husband said, his stepfather, who he spent a lot of time with growing up, had one of those Bibles. And when he passed away, it was one of the things our family cherished most because you could see his processing and what he was learning, and he would date them. So you could see the dates that he was learning something. And it was so amazing that I immediately ordered one and I started writing in it. Well, I can look back on notes of things that I was wrestling with or prayers that were answered. And it brought such joy. I thought, you know what? No, I need to make Bibles this season. I need to make my time with the Word a aesthetically pleasing and a joyful experience. And so I got my pretty pens out, and now I journal on the margins, what margins are left, and got my journal there. And it's really just such an amazing thing to look back on. Even if you'd never journaled before, I would say if you start journaling, you'll be amazed reading back on the things that the Lord has shown you and grown you through. Mm-hmm.
That's so neat. So that's interesting because keeping or putting a date with it is kind of fun to look back. But I just imagine your journal being so beautiful with all of your doodling, you being an artist. I'm sure it's absolutely gorgeous. So I do want to ask, you mentioned just quickly about you and your husband and traveling around for 4 years. Yeah. So if you want to talk a little bit about that time in your life and maybe what you learned through that process.
Yeah, we learned a lot. I feel like we never take the easy route. But it's neat because it gives us a lot of life experience, right? And the Lord knows we're faithful to share all the ups and downs. Like, we are open books, and we find joy in telling people the ways that you probably shouldn't do it this way, or maybe try this. But for us, it was right before COVID had started when I went full time. So that was another layer of my story. It's like, how do you start a business in the economy? Everything's shutting down. But we just sat back and thought, New Orleans doesn't feel like home anymore. Somebody had sent us a picture of our house while we were away, And there was just this disconnect for both of us. And that's when we really sat back and were like, oh, okay, this is not home anymore. This doesn't feel like where we need to be. So we started, talking about the idea of just traveling and just visiting different cities until the Lord spoke to us and told us where to go. Well, neither one of us thought it would be 4 years. And we actually house sat for a good friend. My husband woke up every day with a similar thought of this one couple that we needed to reach out to. And we finally reached out to them, and they had just bought a beautiful house, but they realized that they had a new dream and they were going to go chase it. And so they moved to Florida, and their house was in Louisiana. So we actually stayed and managed their house in the interim for a year. And God did so much through that time. I was able to start writing my story. I wrote 80,000 words during that time for a book that I'm hoping to publish sooner rather than later. And, it was a long process, but I mapped out all of the chapters there. I mean, everything came together, and I'm so grateful for that time to rest and recover and just kind of regroup so that I could start my art business and it not be so weighty on top of my shoulders to provide something, financially. So after that, we just decided to move around. So we would stay with family, friends, or we would get Airbnbs for a couple of months, rent it for a couple of months here or there. And so we had all of these different experiences, and our goal was to really be intentional. So we had both worked 60 plus hours a week, and we were burnt out. And we thought, you know what, we just need time to heal, time to reset our systems. I joke, but it's a very real thing that your body goes through a detox of some sort when you are so used to a certain amount of stress, and then you come down off of that stress. It took me about a year to really fully reset my hormonal levels and anxiety and all of that stuff. So that was the goal. And we thought we would do it for about a year, and then it turned into 2 and then 3. And so this last year we've really, we've been in Tulsa, but we have just been kind of in limbo, wondering if this is going to be a long-term thing or if it's, just for a short time. But I think we're both free with that, whatever the Lord wants to do, we're totally fine with. And so people often ask, they're like, how do you live like that? So up in the air. And I think now we're just used to it, but we do think that this will be a long-term thing. So next is just figuring out where we want to be in the city. And, we've made incredible relationships here so far since being here. And, my husband started a new job and it's going well. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
How exciting. Okay. I love having you close in the area. That's wonderful. Okay. So in wrapping up, my theme for this year is thriving in 2025. So I'd like for you to share what that is, how you're thriving either personally or professionally, and what that means to you.
Yeah. Well, I think the Lord has been very specific. At the end of this last year, I really took a step back and I asked the Lord, okay, what do you want this year to look like? And how can I partner with you and not, do the things, all of these good things, but not, you can do all of these great things, right? But is it the one thing that the Lord's asked you to do? And so he so lovingly showed me that I filled my time this past year with a lot of good things, but I really think he wants me to focus on these series that I have coming up. And there's another one that's been on my heart and my mind from another vision that he gave me a couple of years ago that I just haven't developed. And I really feel like he's telling me, it's time to dig in. It's time to go deep. It's time to stop making excuses of why you can't do these things or you don't have the resources or whatever it may be. So for me, I don't always choose a word for the year, but this year it's authenticity. So my goal is to saturate myself with the authentic Word of God, What is his authentic voice telling me to do? And then who am I authentically as a creative, as his daughter? And how does he want me to show up? And what does he want to say to people to encourage their heart? And so I'm excited about that. I think that feels more like thriving than anything I could have created on my own. Because I know looking back at the year, it will be filled with moments where I chose to trust him a little bit more. And just like my friend's stories with the Mended at the Cross painting, I'm anticipating more stories like that because I'm not putting a limit on what God can do. And so there was a time where I told other people, I have the Moses complex. Like I can't share anything. I can't tell my story. I thought I was much better behind the scenes in the art studio, but the Lord kept giving me opportunities to share. And so finally, you get to the point where you're like, well, I'll just share and maybe he'll get glory from this. And he always does. So yeah, I think being authentic in pursuit of Jesus is the best way to thrive.
Okay, we're going to end with that. That was just amazing. I loved it. I enjoyed our conversation
Me
tremendously, and just can't wait to have you back when you write that book.
Thank you so much. Yes, I will keep you posted on that.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here, Brit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate you being here. And don't forget to connect with me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Sharing Passion and Purpose. And Twitter is at Passion Sharing. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.